All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our December edition of our team gameplay call. My name is Erin Fadden. I'm a project manager with First Tech Challenge. And so today's call is a call that's been set up for teams, coaches, team members, anyone to call in and ask questions of our expert, specifically about the game. So this call is not intended for questions such as, is this part legal? Is it not? This is really about playing the game and the game rules themselves, right? So I just want to make that distinction. I do know that some people on this call might be volunteers. I just want to ask that it's great if you're here, that you just hang back and you listen to the questions that our teams have. So the format of this call, we don't have any official training. This is just a Q&A, so we're just taking your questions. There's a couple ways you can ask questions. You can ask questions using the Q&A feature, or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. You'll have to unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question out loud to the group. And I think those are all of the ground rules that I have. So before we get started, I just want to introduce our expert, Mark Edelman. Actually, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, Mark Edelman. I'm the program delivery partner for Northern California, but also have been a member of the game design committee for a handful of years. And as part of my responsibilities with that group, I've been given the honor of being able to serve as the global head referee. So call really is an opportunity to be able to answer your questions. And so it really boils down to, what do you want to know? How can we build a better understanding?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So like I said, this is all about questions that you have about the game. And please don't be shy, because, ultimately what ends up happening on these calls is that one question will lead to the next, will lead to the next. And the question that you might have that you might be a little bit nervous about asking, someone else probably wants to know the answer to that too. So it's helpful to just don't be shy. Like I said, we're here for you and to answer any questions that you might have
On gameplay.
on gameplay. Thank you. I was gonna say, I almost said the wrong game. Anything having to do with the Into the Deep game. Oh, there's one. Is there a most common human player penalty being called this season that we should be looking out for?
So interestingly, we just finished, like literally 10 minutes ago, the referee and head referee call, and that wasn't something that they brought up. There was not a strong sense of anything from that group. The events I've been at, there have been a fair number of human player issues, and largely it's just them not really paying attention to the watch out for robots rule, right? And so not being careful about making sure that they're not reaching into the field while a robot's in the observation zone. And then the other is making contact with the specimen or sample while the robot's also making contact with that specimen or sample. Typically, that one's been when the human player is trying to slide it along the wall to help align it with the robot as the drivers are trying to align the robot on the other side. So those are probably the easiest. The refs at the events I was at did a good job of talking to the kids and helping them understand the rule they just violated, why it exists, and helping them understand how to avoid it in the future.
Great. Can Drive Team members stop their robots at any time during or after the match? Is there a period where the Drive Team members are not allowed to stop their robots?
Well, new this year, we have the auto stop. So during the autonomous period, auto, you can stop your robot at any point you want. And then when the teleop period kicks back in, it is up to the team to manage how the robot operates and behaves during that time. There's no rules that say you can't start it and stop it over and over again. There is a requirement at the end of the match to actually hit the stop button explicitly before the robot can be retrieved from the playing field. So there's some guidance in, I think it's G502, that helps provide the referee is going to indicate that the field is ready for clearing and is going to give some guidance to the teams to make sure they've all hit their stop button. But that's the time that you actually must hit your stop button. But as an example, at the end of the match, you have an option of either just setting your controllers down to signify that you're no longer controlling the robot, or hitting the stop button. But it's not a requirement.
Oh, thank you. All right. Monitoring chats and things, but not a whole lot going on. Wondering, has anyone had their first event yet? You can type it in the Q&A if you want. Generally, more questions start rolling in after you've been to an event, so it's usually telling. Okay. Like I said, this call is all about any questions that you have. Again, there's no wrong. I hate saying there's no stupid questions, but I believe that. All right, here we go. I got one. Can you provide a summary of the rules for level 2? They said hang or ascent. Specifically, can the upper bar be used to elevate the robot to get it to hang on the lower bar for a level 2 ascent? Mark, I can't hear you all of a sudden.
Uh-oh.
You got, okay, you're back.
It beeped once in my ear. It's like new thing happened. I don't know what that is. The short answer is yes. You can effectively, as long as you meet the criteria for a level 2 ascent, the rungs don't need to be grabbed in any particular order. The thing you can't do is make simultaneous contact with the tiles and the high rung and have that generate a level 3 ascent, right? So the level 3 ascent has some conditions. You can't make contact with that upper rung until you're no longer in contact with the tiles. But yeah, for level 2, you could drive straight up, grab a hold of the high rung, effectively use that to drag the robot up so that it's effectively resting now against the low rung and off of the tile surfaces, meeting the conditions for a level 2 ascent, and you've got a level 2 ascent.
All right. Are robots allowed to slightly reach outside of the field to grab specimens that have been placed on top of the Alliance Station wall?
There's some general forgiveness. The rule is you can't make contact with things that are outside the playing field. And so, making sure that you're being careful and cautious. If that's going to be part of your robot's normal actions, you want to make sure that your human player, whether it's from your team or from your alliance partner's team, understands the need to be careful around that robot as they're picking up those specimens.
What other questions do we have? Might be a good point to just remind everyone on the call that each one of you does have access to our Q&A system. And so every team is given one account where they can ask questions and receive answers on our team Q&A. So I figure it wouldn't hurt, in case you weren't aware of it, I have to find the instructions, but I will put them in the Q&A for everyone to see how to get access to that account. I will find it in a second. There it is. I just put a PDF in the Q&A that the instructions on how to get access to that account, and then the link to the Q&A. I can actually throw that in here too. And even if you don't want to ask a question, you can take a look and see what has been asked specific to gameplay from other teams, and that might help you get prepared for your next event. Of course, the competition manual is the ultimate authority on game rules, so I guess to make that distinction is important. Always make sure that you're going through that first, but the Q&A is meant to kind of help with deeper understanding of some of the rules that are outlined in the competition manual. Great.
Everyone's waiting to hear somebody else's question.
How it always happens. Ugh. Well, we'll give it a few minutes. If people don't have questions, we definitely, can give you your time back. Ooh. We do have a question. Okay, hold on. Yvonne, I am going to unmute you. You just need to unmute yourself and you can ask your question out loud.
Okay, thank you. So the tricky question of the ascent, where the robot goes on an angle and exceeds the 20-inch extension. I'm like so confused as to how that rule works.
So there's a 20 by 42 footprint shadow would be an easy way to talk about it, that the robot needs to maintain as it goes through whatever motions throughout the match. So as long as it doesn't exceed that shadow, it can reach and extend, right? So that's one of the things the referees are going to be watching. So, for example, if your robot reaches, 50 inches straight up and then tips over so that it's now got that reach completely horizontal, it would have violated that 42-inch limit. It is a dynamic check the referees are going to have to watch for. Best thing I could recommend would be to practice, right? Look at, go through practicing with your robot, see how the tilting works out. Encourage the kids to do a little math and figure out what the effective footprint is when it's tipped. There are ways to, with a little basic trig, to go ahead and do that calculation.
So, okay, so I'm going to ask because I keep getting different ways of picturing it. So on one call, I believe I was told it's like if you're looking down, like to the ground from above the robot, if it's exceeding that 42 and 20, is that how it's pictured, or is it in relation to where the chassis of the robot is?
The shadow always stays parallel to the playing field tiles. And so it is, if you look down, and that 20 by 42 shadow, any part of the robot is sticking outside that shadow, or I guess you need to, if you exceed that shadow, you have violated that rule. So yes,
so then,
looking down is the right way to look at it.
Okay, so I understand that. So then the next question is, so I have a 42 extension limit one way and 20 the other. So if I'm looking down at that shadow, and if that robot is within the 42-inch extension limit in the same way that it passes inspection in the beginning, then it's okay? Or does it matter where the 42 shifts to when it's ascending?
The shifting doesn't matter. It's, is that rectangle still observed? Right, that shadow, is it all still completely in the shadow effectively moves with respect to an imaginary point that's tied to the robot. So as the robot translates around the field, the shadow translates with it. The shadow doesn't tip. The shadow always stays parallel to the tiles. And so as long as the robot stays within that shadow, it's in a good position, right? But if it exceeds that shadow, it has violated the rule.
Okay, so if at any moment, as long as it's no more than 42 one way and 20 the other at that point in time, looking down from the top, then it should be okay.
Length and width, right.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Hold on. All right. Is there any chance you'll change the rules to re-allow robots to use the barrier to stabilize the robot and still count as an ascent?
There was a recent team-facing Q&A that addressed the desire that ascent is really about the robot being fully supported by only the rungs, right? And so with that, the any lateral support leaning up against any of the vertical surfaces doesn't end up counting. You're going to really need to make sure that the robot is clearly fully supported only by the rungs.
In order to qualify for the ascent points.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. I guess that didn't exactly answer your question. Is there any chance that humans write the rules? There's always a chance. I am skeptical that this will get revisited.
It has been revisited plenty of times.
You'd think it'd be easy to write a rule about climbing.
Don't love this Q&A feature. She almost got lost. Okay. Well, I could post oh. Right. What else do we got out there?
Crickets.
I know. We have a couple more minutes. If we don't have any other questions, then I think I could give people time back. I think we have another one of these in January.
Yeah, Yep, pretty sure there's one in January.
Oh, we have them in January, February, and March. Okay.
It likely is the same day as the ref call.
Yeah, January 9th. Expect we might have a little bit more there. More questions. As I said, a lot of times we don't get as many questions on these calls when they're a little bit earlier in the season, but as people start to compete, then these do tend to pick up a little bit more. Let's see. Okay. At the first meet, a robot just touched the bottom rung and got credit for the level 1 ascent. The robot was still on the ground.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Level 1 ascent is somewhat intentionally an easy task. One of the things that's true about the game is that there's always something that a simple robot can do without a huge effort. It doesn't give a whole lot of point value, but it's a simple achievement. Right? The more complicated achievements give better point values as a way of encouraging sort of stretching for the teams. But yeah, just driving up and touching the low rung is sufficient to earn a level 1 ascent.
It's pulling up on that same bar that has certain stipulations to get a level 2 ascent. I did also just put in the Q&A. See, another question just came up that was lost on me, but I did just put in the Q&A the list of team-related webinars for the entire season. So if you were interested in any other dates or any other webinars, then that link is there. Okay. If a robot accidentally pulls down on a basket and then quickly releases, and that causes the basket to catapult game pieces outside of the field, how is that called by referees?
Well, not actually being able to see the sequence happen, I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm assuming it was a relatively minor entanglement between the robot and the basket, and that 2 samples popped out of the basket and ended up laying outside the playing field. So that wouldn't end up counting as launching. It wouldn't end up being anything other than the referees would effectively de-score those 2 samples. Head referee may decide, depending upon the level of engagement with the basket, may decide to have a quick conversation with the team to help them understand how to avoid field damage. But I think it's just basically the samples that were in the basket no longer in the basket, so the score goes down. I don't think there really are any other rule violations in that basic setup.
This was a follow-up to the previous question about the robot touching for level 1. It's a statement, the pull-up bar. The pull-up in the bar would be like last season's game center stage.
A little bit, right? The level 2 ascent requires the robot to be off the playing field, off the tiles. It can be supported by either of the 2 rungs as long as it's off the tiles. Level 3 ascent requires that the high rung isn't contacted until the robot is no longer in contact with the playing field tiles. So there's different criteria and different constraints around each. Each achieve level 1 basic points, level 2 better points, level 3 the best points.
All right. Next question is, what are the most common penalties?
Well, so we had our referee call just right before this one, and didn't really talk a whole lot about the penalties. There were a bunch of other topics that ended up dominating the call. I can share just anecdotally from the events that have been in my area. Probably the most common involve a human player not being cautious with their presence in the observation zone while robots are in the observation zone. And then robots being in control of 2 or more samples or specimens. Right, so those are probably the most common. And surprisingly, I saw at least 3 or 4 instances of robots trying to ascend on the wrong side of the submersible.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely as you're practicing and preparing for your matches, you want to make sure that your drivers understand which side is the right side, because you don't want to go to the wrong side.
Mm-hmm.
There should be red or blue tape marks on the rungs that serve as a helpful guide.
Okay, I did. Sorry, Q&A questions are coming in at weird times.
It's a test.
Okay. What's that?
It's a test.
Weird. Have you seen a match yet where the basket is overflowing?
I have seen one that looks pretty full, right? That the samples are starting to extend above the top planar surface of the open mouth of the basket.
More to come on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's early season, right? The teams are all starting to figure out how to play with a partner and against opponents. So it's a time of adaptation.
What else we get? When is a robot considered ascended? Is it literally 3 seconds after the end of the match, or when referees evaluate is it being ascended?
It's a 2-piece condition. It's either when everything's come to rest or at the end of the 3-second buzzer.
Second part of that, some referees seem to think robots have to stay up on the rung well after the match is ended. If the robot falls off the rung 4 seconds after the match is ended, is it still considered ascended?
As long as at the end of the 3-second buzzer, the determination was made that it was ascended, nothing matters after that time point.
Keep flipping back and forth to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Sorry. Why are yellow and colored samples the same points? I think getting in the lines color should be more points.
I guess in truth, the answer is it was completely arbitrary. I think that it might actually basically boil down to there's no difference in effort in terms of retrieving and scoring. The part of the goal is also to encourage the alliance-specific samples to be used for specimens, right? That's where they have the best value. But a sample in a basket or a sample in the net is the same effort, regardless whether it's neutral or alliance-specific. I think would be the base answer.
The sentiment is that it makes the game less challenging because there are no color sensors being used.
I would bet that you aren't seeing enough robots. I'm quite certain that there's teams that are working with automating some of the ability of the robot to filter and get their desired elements. I watched a robot score 9 specimens during a match. And so there's a lot of good work going on retrieving alliance-specific samples, getting them to the observation zone, letting them get converted to specimens, and getting them back onto the chambers. So it was a lot of fun to watch. Very well choreographed. And I use the word choreographed quite specifically because they had obviously planned and practiced. There was a good coordination between the human player and the drivers, and a good sequencing, and a good match strategy. Any other hands up there? Nope. Yes, another question just popped up in my Teams, but we already answered it, so. Why are there no team elements this year? Why are there no balls? Just it didn't fit into the overall gameplay in terms of the way the field spacing worked. It was discussed. Similarly, there's no randomization in this year's game for the auto period, right? And so it didn't fit the gameplay. And that's one of the interesting aspects of developing games, right? That not all games will have the same characteristics.
That was the biggest thing. The team elements were a component of the randomization and using TensorFlow. We no longer use TensorFlow. Well, that from the randomization perspective, I should say.
It'll be interesting to see what the new control system offers in terms of vision. I know vision is a supported aspect of it. So it's going to be an interesting new world in a couple of years.
Same person said, I'm glad there aren't balls in the game.
My grandson would disagree.
How do we use April tags to play the game?
Easiest way to think about April tags is they are landmarks that the robot can use to accurately identify where in the playing field it is based on being able to see one or more of the April tags. Right? So they call them fiducial marks, but basically they provide an anchor point that if the robot can see it, there's some math that can be done to allow you to know X, Y, Z, and angle for where the robot is in the playing field. So, Clever Team could use it as a way of helping the robot be efficient with navigation. As an example, autonomous period could give them some advantages during the autonomous period. Sometimes there are things like that are part of the game that we don't really dictate how to use it. It's there as an aid if teams choose to use it.
I did just put underneath that comment in the Q&A. Actually, I don't know if everyone can see that. I'll put it in the main. But there's a tutorial. It just talks about April tags and the use and how to use them. So hopefully that would be really helpful in answering that question. And if it's something that you'd like to use, you'd be able to do so. Oh, Danny put a different one. I'll put that one up there too. I think you can see both. I don't know. Perfect. All the resources. All right. All right. What other questions do we have? Don't stand over. Right. Have you seen a game that ran out of samples?
I have not seen a starved game yet. But again, it's still early season.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen run out of samples, and I haven't seen anybody run out of clips. Those are the two that I would kind of be surprised, right? Oh, they were mentioning that during power play they ran out of cones. So at least for this season, we did reserve the right to during the first championship, if we need to, we can
increase the number of samples. So on those higher levels of play, we do have that option.
And when the game design is created, there's a guess as to what's the right number of scoring elements, and sometimes we're pretty good. And obviously, in the power play year, we missed a little bit. Teams focused on gameplay different than we anticipated, and caused the cones to become a scarce resource. That caused a different behavior from the teams, and they all started to learn to descore their own cones and rearrange them, which I found to be very fascinating.
Okay. I think it's probably a good time to wrap up. I do want to thank everyone for joining tonight. I did already put a link to the next couple of meetings in the team webinars in the chat. So if you are interested in those, then please feel free to sign up for those. But I want to say thank you all for joining. Thank you, Mark, for answering questions.
Yep, my pleasure.
Sorry, just tacking on to what we were just talking about, where we reserve the right to add more for championship. The comment was, "You can add more fish to the pond." That's great. Awesome. Thank you for asking your questions. We really appreciate it. And if you can't make these calls, we do post these on YouTube, so you can always catch those later if you would like to see what was asked, and if you're just curious to be in the know. But yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. I hope you have a fantastic season, and we'll see you soon.
Yep. Good luck at your events. Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night.